one of the most brilliant minds in media is a fellow named Rishad Tobaccowala, who's the chief strategist for the Publicis Group. And he's going to talk to us today about how agencies themselves are evolving.
Thank you. And this is going to be a 10-minute presentation without videos. And no slides. Since we're going to try to see if we can have intelligence everywhere versus video everywhere. So, very, very simply, we are obviously in a massive time of change. And there are three key drivers of change globally. One is globalization itself. The other is demographic shifts. And the third is digitization. Globalization continues. There are countries and people who try to prevent it, but it is kind of not stoppable. Demographic shifts are for real. I was in Africa last week. The average age there is a little under 21. I was in China, where the average age is aging, so they've said, okay, now 2 children. But demographics take their own time. The real shift is, if you think about force being mass into acceleration, is digitization. And the key thing that's driving digitization are these things, okay? Phones. Or if you think about them, little video screens in our pockets to a great extent. And when you look at phones, there are about 900 million mobile phones in India. 700 million of them activated. And the number of smartphones in the last 18 months has gone from 20 million to 200 million. More interestingly, the 2 phones that I currently have are the current United States state-of-the-art in phones. So it's the most sophisticated Samsung and the most sophisticated Apple. A year ago, those phones had 625 times the processing power of a Pentium computer of 1995. 1 year later, each of them have 70% more processing power, so it's about 1,000 times more, which means more power in these phones than in the first space shuttle, more computing power. That, by the way, is what we all have in our pockets. The prices are plunging and will continue to plunge, and the power will continue to increase significantly. As a result of that, all of us, when we're at home, are David. And that little device is the slingshot that lets us bring down Goliath. And you know who Goliath is? It's us when we work for marketers. It's us when we are a marketer. It's us when we're an agency. That's what's really bothering people. What's really bothering people is all of a sudden, marketers have got to learn to market, which they have not done for 30 years. Okay, and I've worked in marketing for 30 years. And I came to the United States and I read this book at the University of Chicago by Philip Kotler called What is Marketing? Marketing is understanding and meeting customer requirements. And then for 30 years, I worked across some of the best clients in the world and realized that's not what they were doing. I could predict P&G market share for Crest by telling you where distribution to Walmart was going to happen and their share would go up. I could figure out, looking at scanner codes, I could figure out doing a lot of stuff, and I realized 80% of what marketers were doing was a combination of logistics, technology, and financial gatherings or manipulations. Till 2007. In 2007, 2 things happened. The iPhone and Facebook went from .edu to .com. All of a sudden, we were highly empowered and we could speak. And marketers all of a sudden had to pay attention. Therefore, when we are at work, we have a headache. When we're at home, we are the cause of the headache. Okay? So we are in that lovely world where we are David and we are Goliath. When we're at an agency, when we're at a media company, when we're at a marketer, we are Goliath. The other place is David. And that really is where we are living, which is we're living in an empowered age. As part of this empowered age and as part of this digitization, one of the biggest changes that is basically happening is the opportunities and threats that face any particular industry come from outside it. So the reality of it is when the iPhone came out, Nokia and BlackBerry did not take it seriously for two reasons. One reason they did not take it seriously is because it did not happen to have a keyboard. But the real reason they decided not to take it seriously is, what does Apple know about phones? Because this was someone who was a computer company, and those days they were still called Apple Computer, were coming from outside. There is no Nokia to a certain extent, though there is a Nokia company, and there's highly questionable as to when the last BlackBerry will be shipped. Okay? So the reality of it is, you don't take people seriously, things happen. The real competitor to Nikon is not Canon, it's again the iPhone, or any smartphone to a great extent, because what's the use of a phone if you can't share your picture on Snapchat or Instagram or Facebook, right? And I sort of named it. If you're younger, you'd be on Snapchat. If you're older like us, you'd be on Facebook. In between, you'd be on Instagram, right? So that's the way the world works. And that is basically sort of the reality that we're living in. The threats and opportunities come from outside, and that is absolutely true for all of our clients, and it is also very true for us. So the real opportunities and threats to a holding company is not another holding company, though right now all of them are doing better than us, so we respect them greatly. But the reality of it is, benchmarking against other pathetic people doesn't make you any less pathetic. Right? And the reality of it is, we have to basically shift. And the shift that all of us, and all these companies, by the way, everyone are smart. So to a great extent, unlike a lot of people, I actually believe we're surrounded by very smart competitors, very smart clients, and very smart people. It's just that sometimes we have to show how smart we are by actually doing interesting things versus pretending that this is a world that we cannot actually engage with and we ourselves cannot transform, which we definitely can. So towards that, there are 6 key changes that are basically happening. And then I will sort of end with 3 ideas, and then that'll be my 10 minutes. So the 6 key changes that we should be thinking about is, first is marketing is being outsourced to the end user. We are no longer marketers, we are marketing, we're helping people market to themselves. Okay, so we're facilitating self-marketing. The CMO is an outdated title. It should be replaced by CFO, which is Chief Facilitation Officer. That's number 1. Number 2, the world is going to be less and less about advertising. It's going to be more and more about utilities and services. The reality of it is, nobody actually wanted advertising. Okay? What you're beginning to see is consumers are choosing not to have advertising through ad blockers, through Netflix, through Spotify, the $15 or $9 version, etc. Give me a utility, give me a service, don't basically give me a stupid message. Okay? That's the reality, face it. And that's where the world is going to basically go. I'm not saying advertising is disappearing, but advertising itself is not a growth industry. That's sort of the number 2. Just have to go with the trend, as Shakespeare says, or lose, right? That's the trend. The third, which is extremely important, is video is going to be increasingly important, and video is going to be everywhere. But increasingly, the future of video is going to come from the slime and not the heavens. Pay less attention to the NBC part of Comcast, pay more attention to the Comcast part of Comcast, okay? Pay more attention to YouTube and Netflix and Amazon than necessarily CBS, till CBS everywhere comes around. Because the future comes from the slime and not the heavens. And you've seen that today. If you haven't tried it, try the new Apple TV. It's extraordinary, still a work in progress, but extraordinary. It is true, the future is apps and not channels. But it's video everywhere, which is good, and it'll be all over the place, but it will be actually driven by that 10% in 2017 programmatic, et cetera. That's sort of the third. The fourth one, which is extremely important, is owning data itself is obsolete. I know there are lots of companies who believe that owning data is really important, but when the shelf life of a tweet or the half-life of a tweet is 8 minutes, it's how do you access data, not how do you own it. It's almost impossible to own all the data you want. How do you quickly access? How do you basically have the APIs? And it is not actually the data itself. It is the algorithms, it's the API, and it's the plug-and-play partnerships that make a very big difference. So owning 10% of one company or owning something else is so 1980s, okay? It makes no sense to a great extent. So we think in sort of a different model. Very, very importantly, and I will sort of end with this point, is we have to recognize that in a silicon, digital, data-driven world, we are talking to carbon analog human beings. And therefore, storytelling and creativity is going to be very, very important. Brands are increasingly mattering. Creativity is mattering. I think to a great extent, what was said about kinetic, I think there's a new form of creativity, which is kinetic. The old creativity, which still is very powerful, was basically video and film and audio and word and place, all very important, continue to be important. But the new ones are mobility. What is mobility? What mobility basically says is where you are is as important as who you are. I know where you are. I can do partnerships with people, access information. I know where you are. Social, which is you are part of the story. And APIs, which is you yourself can plug into, whether it's a YouTube video or some database to tell a story. Those are kinetic forms of storytelling. So with that, we as an organization, and we'll have more conversations on that, and all of us have to also recognize that change sucks, okay? So a lot of people say change is good, and my basic belief is I'm a happy camper. If things suck for you, you change, okay? I'm really cool. Don't worry about me. You change, okay? The problem simply is, and I hate the goddamn change. I worked for one boss for 11, now for 4. I worked for the same company for 34 years, lived in the same city for 36, and know my wife for 40 years. It wasn't a child marriage, okay? But the reality of it is I absolutely hate change. And supposedly, I'm one of the people supposed to drive change. Very strange. What that basically is basically I've begun to realize the more things you want to stay the same, the more you're going to have to change yourself, right? And therefore, our biggest challenges for all of us who are successful or trying to be successful is how do we actually change the people? Because everything is easy, but people get in the way, right? The reality of it is you can't just get rid of everybody. It doesn't work, okay? So how do we change the people? And that is basically a combination of how do we learn to collaborate better? How do we change cultures? How do we create competencies? And those are really the struggles that most organizations are having. And the organizations are actually too much about data, too much about technology, and not about real change. And we'll talk more about that. Thank you.